Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Steffen, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dreamdata.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dreamdata employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations,
social selling maybe. Hello and welcome everybody to another Attributed session brought to you by Dreamdata. I'm super excited today to do this panel that we've planned today because this is the free pick for things you think are going to go well and going to go bad during 25. It's where we make predictions that we can be called out on when it's 26, where we were completely wrong or completely right. So I'm super excited to hear my panelists today about what they have been putting more of into their marketing plans and what they've ripped out of the marketing plan from 24. So it's basically today a casual opportunity to predict the future for B2B marketers, which all of you guys are. Just to let the people that are listening in live do ask questions. But also the people listening on the podcast afterwards. Let's just allow them to get to know a little bit about the company you work at, what's your role, and your one prediction for what you're going to see more of in 2025's marketing world. Brian, you're in Texas, so you're up early. I'll let you start and then leave it to the two Europeans afterwards.
Thanks, Steven. Yeah, I'm Brian. I'm the digital marketing demand gen guy at Maxio, which is a B2B billing and financial reporting platform, primarily for SaaS and companies with subscription and usage revenue. My background is in web development and digital marketing, of course. And when I think of 2025 and how we've been looking over our marketing plans, I think everyone's talking about AI, generative content, all of that. But I think it's going to allow us to scale marketing teams in a different way. And so I think one of the main ways it's impacted what we're doing is how we're structuring the team and dividing and conquering in the new year. So I think that's one of the things I'm most excited for is how we can scale the team differently this year as opposed to previous years.
Wonderful. Liam, you?
Yeah, cool. Hey, everyone. So I'm Liam Collins. I'm the VP of Paid Acquisition at Cognism Group. So Cognism is a leading sales intelligence platform for European revenue growth. Essentially for anybody who's in sales, marketing, or RevOps, it enables you to have access to incredible intent signals and data, which allow you to take the guesswork out of selling and focus on selling, right? I've been at Cognism just over a year, so not a long time, but still coming to my year anniversary of February. What am I excited for next year? It's similar to Brian, actually. I think it's a twofold thing. One is AI, which we're getting a bit bored of talking about now because it's everywhere. But two is actually content, and particularly the kind of influencer content that we're seeing now. And I think the two merge together because actually with AI being so prominent, we're going to enter a world where it's actually difficult to have that authenticity and to develop that brand trust and the positioning, because you're going to have lots of content that is just crowding, the marketplace. So I think that's a super exciting opportunity for us because it means that obviously we have to really double down and make sure we're driving quality content that adds value to our audiences. So I think that's a super interesting, time for 2025.
I like that, but eager to get into the quality one, Liam, afterwards. But Brad, let's hear who you are and where you work and what's one thing for 25.
Thanks, Steffen. And yeah, good afternoon to you, Brian and Liam. Yeah, really excited to be in this on this webinar. I'm Brad Diamandis. I'm the VP of Global Marketing at Configit. We're a B2B SaaS company. We help manufacturers solve their product configuration challenges and basically enable them to get their products to market faster and essentially without errors. So what excites me? Well, I'm going to jump on the AI bandwagon. But also, I think what I'm excited about is the opportunity that AI gives us marketers. So we want to spend time doing all the cool stuff, the creative stuff, the strategic work, the deep dives, looking into what our customers are doing. And I think if we use AI way, we can get through some of the other tasks that we the admin tasks that we loaded with, with the long to-do lists, And so using AI to give us more time back so we can do the cool things in marketing that we really enjoy.
I think you cut out a little bit there in the end, Brad, but it's funny that I actually, for the guys in my notes today, I didn't put a single word about AI, but I guess we have to have this conversation today. Maybe, Liam, if you start there with I think we just have to go through the good and the bad and the ugly of AI in B2B marketing to get that out of the way.
Yeah. I think building on kind of what Brad said before, so our CEO, James will say he's basically introduced an AI OKR for every department. And one of our mission statements for 2025 is to be an AI first company. I think every company at B2B also probably has the same OKR at the moment. But definitely, like, I think some of the ugly stuff is obviously, I talked very much about content. Like one of the threats we have at the moment is like, even if you consider founder-led branding, right? Companies or startups now with AI video capabilities, you can almost create these automated videos and transcripts, and you can scale it. And like, we're going to have this area where like the lines are blurred between what's real and what's fake. So I think from a marketing standpoint, like we can still set the guardrails for that. We can still define what are the things we want to be known for, who are the right audience that we want to position our content for, and equally so, like how do we still demonstrate that authenticity? And I think it goes further than just sort of thinking about your own brand. Like at Cognism, we release lots of content where we actually partner with other people who have that authority in the market. And I think it's just leveraging those connections, and that's going to kind of help the brands that really are at the forefront of that content strategy that will stay ahead of the competition. And I think, and if you don't do that, then obviously you're going to get lost. So that's actually a bad thing, but I kind of position it as a good thing. And then to what Brian said, I think, I think actually collaboration is going to be one of the key things here. How do we automate insights, right, that are shared, amongst teams? Even something we're looking at within the paid search channel at the moment for us is like a search as GPT, right? What used to take literally hours upon hours of writing out copy, we're working on creating like a search GPT where we feed in certain inputs like character length, and then we work with the product marketing team, so they have access to the GPT. They feed in product position and messaging, and what used to take so long in terms of time, like we hit the button, it creates all these ads, and straight away seamlessly, one, we improve collaboration, and two, we've got hundreds of ads that we can then test and iterate on. So I think that's just one example, but overall, I think, it's something that if you're not harnessing now, then obviously you're going to be left behind. But I think as marketers, really, we're the custodians of maintaining that quality assurance, and that everything we do is aligning to where the business is heading.
That's a thing that is a brilliant use case for AI in marketing, because, oh Lord, writing search ads is boring as well. You just be curious to hear a little bit about what does the CEO mean when the company has to be an AI first company?
Yeah, so it's very much top to bottom. So from a product development perspective, we've actually released a new feature, which is AI search. So for any salesperson, right, if you're looking to find contact data, and more often than not, you kind of know who your ICP is, what department they're in. Previously, when you use other sales intelligence platforms, you'd go in, right, and you'd have to sift through tons and tons and tons of contacts, right? What the new search AI feature does for you is it allows you to kind of give inputs to the system, and then the platform does all of that planning for you. So it groups together different job titles and functions. It will build you a target account list or a contact list that is applicable to the inputs you put in. And literally it just speeds up that entire process. So from a product standpoint, we're really looking at developing the product so that it can make life easier for all of the customers that we're trying to support. From a mindset perspective, like I think it's just making everybody think about, if there is a repetitive task that you do repeatedly, how do we actually think about it completely different? Like first principles thinking, right? What do we really want to do here? What are we trying to solve? And what is the quickest way to solve that? More often than not, that's through AI. And then again, like really on the ground from an application perspective. And another real simple example is just even just meeting note taking. Like previously, I used to have to sit and do follow-up notes. Now we're trialing, some of the brands out there like Otter.ai or Gemini, you can literally pull those meeting notes together in a really condensed way. It summarizes it. It automatically sends those notes to everybody on the meeting. So it's just literally like, I think AI is just all encompassing in everything we do now. And as marketers, we're usually a little bit ahead of the curve. And I think it's probably just embedded. And I'd like to hear more about Brian and Brad's experience, but I'd imagine it's similar to me. It's embedded in almost everything you do now.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's exactly that. One thing is the product, but another thing is just focusing on how we can spend our time on the most impactful things in marketing and get rid of the tedious tasks through AI.
Yeah.
Even anecdotally,
Yeah, exactly
for me,
that.
AI is also great for the important, the influential stuff or the creative stuff as well. But Brian, how has AI made its way into your work?
But we're also using it, of course, for content creation, writing ads, Google search ads in particular. I don't know how many thousands of 30-character headlines I've written over the course of my career, but it's nice to have a starting point anytime you set out to do that. I think that's really helpful. Another area really is video. I think video editing. Oftentimes, if I was doing this 10 years ago, I'd maybe pass a longer form piece of content over to a contractor who's going to slice it up for me, and I'd pay them an hourly rate, and the results would vary as far as like what I would get. And nowadays you can add an hour-long webinar video, and you've got 28 short clips that are transcribed with captions, and they're just ready to go. So like the scale there is different. That it's ever been before. So I think that's one of the main ways we're using it today. I like a lot of what Liam says about training it, because I think anyone can just throw stuff into AI or an LLM, right, and get some information back. But you need that extra level of context for your company and for marketing in general, right, to really make the most of the platform. So we're trying to make sure that the team is set up to make the most of these platforms, and not just tell it to write a blog post and going with what the blog post the AI created was.
Yeah, I feel like maybe we should talk a little bit about where it's good to apply AI and where you shouldn't be applying AI, because I think we've all seen enough of these AI images by now. And at least the low to medium quality ones just go straight into everybody's defense and like, no, thank you, I don't want this. Or the very generic AI text, it just has zero impact, which is also why I'm personally a little bit skeptical when people talk about this AI SDR, because we're really good at detecting when something is AI and there's no effort put into things, which I think that's why the efficiency of the AI SDR is already decreasing. But who knows, I might be proving wrong. But Brad, in terms of B2B marketing, where's the good places to use AI according to you, and what's the worst places to use AI?
Yeah, I think content, I think, is one of them. I think Liam and Brian touched upon that. But there's a couple of other areas that I think you could use it. One for us is we're updating our corporate visual identity. So, taking those branded elements and designs that you want to work and have that across all your elements, your social media, your ads, onto your emails, et cetera, having a tool that can scale that and put it in different sizes and just make those changes a lot easier. It's a lot more difficult if you have to go in and adapt each one as you go. So I think that's one way we're going to scale AI in connection with our new corporate visual identity. Content, I won't touch on it too much. I think we've talked about it a lot. You can use it for scaling ads, giving you a lot of different options when you're doing whether it's LinkedIn headers or your paid ads, paid search ads. So content, again, in terms of long form content, blogs and white papers, I think that's always a great way that can give you a nice start. But again, you've got to go in and make those changes so it does come across as being authentic and written by someone who's a human, essentially. And so we always do that as a start, and then send it to our in charge of content and communications. And I think that saved us a lot of time. So yeah, there's some nice ways that you can scale AI.
Liam, anything you want to point out?
Yeah, I really like all of the use cases, and interestingly, like something else that sprung to mind while you were going through some of those examples is historically, like if we wanted to segment our audience at Cognism and like have a deeper understanding of the buying committee and who were the influencers of these deals, it would require like hours of going through Salesforce and trying to pin who's the contacts or who else has been added to deals through the meeting notes, right? It would just be so painful. And the second piece of that would be gathering sales feedback, which sometimes can be unreliable, right? And so you'd always find that you're kind of in this messy middle where you're trying to quantify that qualitative feedback from a marketing perspective so you can make better decisions. And something that we did more recently as well is we literally, so we used Gong, and we wanted to build out a revised buying committee for our accounts by segment. And like we literally asked Gong to assess thousands of calls and then take down the job personas and titles and of all the different departments that were involved in those conversations. And then what it did is it was able to spit out like a number, which we were able to quantify, and it helped us map out our buying committee. And then instead of getting sales feedback as part of that original process, we actually then just took that recommendation to sales and asked them for feedback where it made sense. And it was a much faster process. We gained a lot more clarity as well from a marketing perspective. And I think also the sales team, like they trusted us more because ultimately like it's coming from their feedback where, you know, we're not actually sort of coming to them with marketing saying what we think. We're saying to them, actually, this is conversations you've actually had. You've told us the answers, and then we're building our strategy around supporting you. So I think going back to the point I raised about collaboration, and like Brad touched on it with, insights and kind of being able to sort of do more strategy kind of stuff. I think that this is just one use case that came to mind when we were talking through their examples.
I want to go back and do that right now with our Gong account. Brian, any last words on AI? Otherwise, we'll just give it a breather.
I think what Liam touched on there at the end is turning the qualitative into quantitative, which is an excellent use case in marketing. So, obviously Maxio uses Dreamdata for, data-driven attribution, but we also collect quite a bit of self-reported attribution as well. And AI is an excellent tool hooked up to Gong or something similar to not just collect, but also aggregate and figure out how you should be categorizing your self-reported attribution. So I think that how you can turn qualitative into quantitative, I think that's an excellent example, Liam.
Yeah, we've also been experimenting with downloading the reviews we have on G2 and putting that into ChatGPT to both kind of what are the most requested features, what are the most loved features, try to write something related to this, etc. So yeah, lots of wonderful full use cases. Let's change the chapter just a little bit from AI for now, and then let's move into, before we can predict the future, we need to understand the past. So thinking about 24, what was one tactic or campaign that really positively surprised you at your company and why? Brad, do you want to give it a first go?
Sure. So we're in a very niche market. We're working with large manufacturers. And so I think what we were trying to do, or this one campaign that really worked for us, was combining a lot of intent data. So we've got a lot of intent data we use 6 Sense, can be from Zoom Info and some other intent tools. So we captured that information we got intent from 6 Sense. We added it together with Dreamdata Reveal data. And then we also added it together with our LinkedIn campaign data. And what you essentially get then is you get an overview of companies that are engaging with your brand through Reveal, externally on other, do keyword research and other research on the platforms that you don't own through 6 Sense, and then adding that together with how you're performing on LinkedIn. And what you get if you cross all those together, you'll get a circle where you're almost looking like a top age group of companies that gives you quite a good indication whether they're in market and interested in you. And then taking that information and then really putting it into ad campaigns and really focusing on them and using your top performing for leadership ads, demand gen ads, your case stories. And that's actually worked really well for us. We can see the effects of that, and we can see an increase in those kind of companies coming in asking for a demo, and then entering our sales funnel. So I think that's been quite a good win for us, and quite a nice way of using the great data we have available.
Super nice. What about you, Liam? Is there an honorable mention here?
Yeah, I mean, you miss Cognism in that list.
Yeah.
You don't.
So yeah, we did my example is similar actually. So the growth at all cost era is behind us now, right? And so being able to spend frivolously on people that might not necessarily fit your ICP, those days are gone. We conducted a similar exercise where we used Dreamdata to look at the reveal data to see which companies were coming through to us. We did the same with the LinkedIn company report. And we created a new role internally, which is around like ABM as well. And so we have a dedicated resource now that purely looks at kind of always mapping the ICP. And we created our own, at the moment it's manual, but like it's an ICP sheet where we feed in all these different data sets, as well as some firmographic data, as well as some other sort of tons of different signals, right? And we manually then select our accounts through that method. And so we found that that's super useful when we're thinking about our ABM program. And then we conducted a similar exercise to what Brad was talking about as well. Like, I really like the way you kind of said about the different data sets and you have the bit in the middle. We did the exact same process. Like when I joined Cognism, I did a bit of an audit of the accounts. And at that point, they were performing really well. But ultimately, as where we're going in 2025, we need to win more business through accounts that fit our ICP. So we've done a similar narrowing down exercise and kind of, it's really important to take stakeholders on this journey with you when you do this exercise, because as soon as you say to somebody and tell them, I'm got to cut down the audience sizes, right? People think, whoa, you're going to lose MQLs or you're going to lose squares or a pipeline. And actually, I think the conversation is a bit more forward thinking about that. This is where our revenue comes from, work back from there. And it's good to hear that Brian's done a similar exercise because that's exactly how we operate in Cognism. And we're kind of constantly refining that process as we go.
Wonderful. What about you, Brian?
I'll take a less data-driven approach, and I'll lean on the qualitative here. But one thing we did in 2024, which we're kind of doubling down on in 2025, is like webinars with other voices. So, we're just talking about AI and how AI, is kind of changing content, and people can see when the content is AI and how you get trusted voices as part of your efforts. So that was kind of the goal. So this was actually a strategy where we weren't using AI at all. It was just how do we put ourselves in the channels and to the audiences where our market's already being influenced. So, we looked at for our space and our buyers, like who are the top voices, and found a bunch of them to partner with and ran different webinars throughout the year. And some of them were absurdly successful, by far the most efficient thing we did in 2024. And I think when we look back at that, we've tried to craft a formula for us. Like, okay, what were the things that made certain webinars do better than others, right? And I think it's a combination, of course, of how well we can promote it, but also how well or how interested in other parties are at promoting it as well, whether it be a partner or, a voice in the space, like an influencer of sorts. So I think that it was expected all along that those would work. It was unexpected how well they'd work and how long lasting the impact of those would be. Because we had one specific webinar we did in February, people were still referencing 8-10 months later. So that was unexpected.
That's a pretty great webinar. And that was constructed of kind of thought leaders within your industry, Brian, or what made it great?
Yeah, I think, as we tried to create that formula to figure out what makes them great, the topic was super relevant, super timely, very interesting to the whole market for us. The experts talking about it, not only were they really well respected in the field and had their own audiences as well, which several of them brought to the webinar, but they just did a really great job presenting as well. So, every element thereafter the webinar was really well. We followed it up with a blog post from one of the presenters, shorter video clips, things like that. So, I think it's a combination of timing and promotion and who was on it, and people trusted the voice, and it was kind of a combination of thought leadership and product marketing in a way. This is the main topic we're covering. Oh, and here's how you would do that with Maxio, right? Which, Steffen, I've seen you do that a lot with Dreamdata, of course. So I think it helps always when your webinar isn't super salesy, right? That's why people show up, not to see your product often.
That's what we're doing right here. So for 25, let's talk a bit about where you're doubling down. Where's your attention, your resources, your time going? Brad, you want to give us the first kind of indications of what are you doing more at Configit in 25?
Yeah, thanks, Steffen. So we're looking at a number of different things where we can make improvements, obviously. One of them is really leveraging our thought leaders. So we're trying to create a new market. We have created a new market, which is extremely exciting, but it means that you really need to have a strong voice in the market and you need to use your thought leaders. For us, it's our founders, but also what it means is they're also extremely busy. They're high-level executives. They got, everyone's pulling them in different directions. So it's really about trying to leverage them in the market. So one of the things that we've started to do is use social media post scheduling. So we've just sort of started this off, but we've got in the tool Octopost, which allows us to jump in and actually post on their behalf. And so that's a nice way that we can save their time. They trust us in terms of the message that we put out. So once they allow us to do that, we can start posting for them and then use those as thought leadership ads in LinkedIn. They perform it really well for us. And so we've been quite positive about that. And then also combining those with different messages that are from analysts and from our partners. So we work with a lot of analysts and partners that are big names in the industry, PwC, Deloitte, PTC. So there's a lot of weight that goes with that. So getting them to talk together with us, and actually having what we've also started to do is having events together with them, hosting events together with them, where we talk about our market and they host it, and we sort of come as the thought leaders behind that, and that's been hugely beneficial to us. We can say you can see the amount of people that it brings into to our websites, that then come on and join our webinars and our tech talks. So yeah, I think we're really going to double down on that in 2025 and make the most use of it, because it's performing extremely well.
I think that could be a new life, just focusing on how to create a trustworthy CEO voice that you control. We've been trying a few similar things that we have had somebody from the marketing team draft posts that the C-levels can then do on their own behalf. It gets done something like 1 out of 100 times or something like that. And you're like, whoa, why don't you do it? But also we can't just write how we would write it, because that's not the voice and tone of whoever the CTO or CEO or whoever it is. Have you done much work there, Brad, to kind of make sure that it actually sounds like this person?
Yeah, so we have. We've done a lot of work over the last 3 or 4 years, where we've got a video company in. We sat and do those videos from a couple of different angles, and we get them to talk about the industry, about what we do, and then capture all of that, and then use those in posts. And then typically what we get, or what we've done, is we really want them to write it in their voice. So we've drafted it, as you said, and we send it to them, and we get them to say, is this kind of how you would say it? And often they make a few changes, and then we use that. Luckily, the person writing our content is brilliant, and she's been here for a number of years, so she really understands them and can write very, very close to them. So it doesn't take a lot of time for them to update that. But of course, we're trying to make it a little bit more efficient, and as long as we don't lose that authenticity of it being their voice, I think that's also important.
It's super nice. I mean, a little DIY trick can be, a team member of me have taken all the LinkedIn posts I've written the last 2 years and put into creating my own GPT on ChatGPT. Because I've written so much on LinkedIn, it's actually quite good at writing like me, and the cost of setting that up is very low cost. I just want to call out a comment here by Addie, which I didn't know the expression, but she's calling it a manel and not a panel. I guess that's what she's hinting at. And some of you would probably have seen that before Christmas, I put up a post about the statistics of gender on our lives this season. And I can't recall exactly, but I think we finished like 1/3 women and 2/3 men. And that was actually what made me put up that post. So today we're 4 men. We're sorry, but that's what's just out of coincidence what happened. Addy, if you know any great women that we should put on our lives, just make sure to send them our way, and we'll be happy to interview them. So just wanted to get that out there. This is actually fun. The speakers we have this year now, we index them by men versus women, just to make sure we don't go too much off course to one of the directions. So that's it. Liam, in terms of your double downs for 25, what's on your radar?
Yeah, I think again it's very similar to the approach that Brad's taken. Like if you remember at the top of the call, I talked very much about content and staying ahead of the competition because, Cognism, for anybody that is aware of the brand, we build in public. Everything we do, we're constantly posting about it. And we were probably one of the first brands that really adopted, that thought leadership and that building content out in public, right? And we're very conscious that obviously competitors will be catching up. So we've kind of gone back to center, and to our roots. And so the basic fundamentals are like our media machine. So we have big rock campaigns that we release every year, like the cold calling report. We've got a lot of new content coming out around our European data quality because we believe we have a competitive edge against any of the other data or intent-based platforms out in the market. And we're really focused on value adds. These are our big rock campaigns. And then we have obviously, similar to what Brad mentioned, this content trickles out across a number of different distribution channels so that we can repurpose it and try and get as much lifetime out as possible. And then something that we've done is we've gone back to our demand gen philosophy as well. So we break our content out into thought leadership content, which is kind of what we want to be known for, which is the big rocks. We've then got social proof, product value, and then our demo bucket, which is kind of ways to kind of re-engage and convert. And we've tried to weave in the big rock campaigns and our thought leader strategy across one another. We've also split out our thought leadership strategy so that we have both internal and external vendors, similar to how Brad and Brian have both spoke about in this call. I really like Brian's example of partnering with different brands. So we're doing a lot of that because it's twofold beneficial, right? It enables us to help grow their brand because we share the same share of voice, vice versa, but equally so it provides social proof, which re-enhances, and reinforces people's opinions about our brand. So we're doing that. And then internally, again, we're trying to really schedule our content releases in a way that we keep reinforcing that point around our European data quality and adding value actually to our customer base because it's just typical, right? Unless you keep getting repeatedly told, you're not going to remain front of mind. So we want to make sure that every customer touch point, content is available that adds value, which reinforces our value propositions throughout the year. I think that's the key ones really. I think also something that we do at Cognism is we're very much moving away from MQL as a primary metric. I absolutely hate MQLs. I think it's just one of the, as marketers, it's one of the things that we used to live and die by, right? But I think definitely now that kind of that growth at all cost period has moved on. Ultimately, what we should constantly be doing is looking at where the revenue is coming from and have this revenue first mindset. And at Cognism, this is what we live and breathe. But it's just making sure now that everything we do is focused on sales qualified opportunities and generating more pipeline. And so that's a big shift actually, just generally for the market that I'm seeing and the industries we're in. But ultimately, thinking, how does that content really drive value and get quality leads into the funnel? And then how do we continually optimize that media machine process so that we're driving more value for the sales team so that they can obviously have better conversations?
That's super nice. I noticed you said external and external thought leaders. So it's you have your own team posting, but you then also identify people who are posting about Cognism and then you sponsor them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've essentially split our marketing department on the paid side into emerging markets and core markets. And so for the core markets, some of the challenges are very different, right? It's really about how do we get that segmentation from an audience perspective to get the right message in front of the right decision maker or the right champion. And so we've accelerated on our experimentation there because we want to be able to learn faster than what we currently are. And ultimately, like, it gives the team as well the ability to kind of rapidly test message themes without requiring lots of input from senior stakeholders, as long as it fits within the product messaging guidelines that we've established. For the emerging markets, right? We very much have this opportunity where we ourselves are expanding to new regions and new territories. And so from a thought leadership standpoint, our internal thought leaders can start releasing content about what resonates, and what kind of campaigns or marketing tactics we're deploying that have an impact. Last year alone, we scaled France and Germany to essentially new regions for us. And now they could almost be considered core regions because the revenue that they generate is significant. And it's this kind of insight, I think, that's really valuable to a lot of brands, because either people aren't talking about it enough, or the sources that they're getting content from aren't authentic. And my experience would be that there's so much content produced. Oftentimes you don't know where to look, whether or not the content is just produced and it's actually rubbish advice, or whether it's authentic and it's something that you can trust in. And so that's ultimately where we want to get to. We want to make sure that we have a combination of both internal, right, thought leadership and content where we're leading the way and driving value for our customers. And then the external piece is ultimately like, how can we support our partners get better results and have better relationships and better connections? But equally so, how can we use their insights to kind of validate us as a trusted source that people can rely on?
Wonderful. What about you, Brian? What are you doubling down on?
Yeah, I already mentioned webinars. I think just to kind of echo Brad and Liam's points, we're also focused on, both internal and external voices. So our CEO is probably our largest internal voice to the market. We've doubled down on his podcast. So he's got a weekly podcast. We've really doubled down on how to make the most of that. He likes to joke that only his mother watches, but we know for sure that's not true. And people have referenced it, and sales calls and whatnot, and even in reviews. So that's an example of how we're doubling down on an internal voice. And I think with external voices, we're really trying to find anywhere our audience is being influenced and who's speaking in those areas, so that we can double down on that from an external voice perspective. So huge trend in 2024, and I don't see it slowing in 2025, and I can't imagine it's going to slow anytime soon. But I'm happy to be proven wrong. I reserve the right to get smarter, and I think that's important for marketers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we use thought leader ads a lot at Dreamdata, and the best thing about them is you already have the validation from the organic post that it took off, so it resonates. So knowing that when you put it in front of your ICPs, the likelihood of the post working well is kind of already validated. So it's a secure success. So that's the positive sides, the things you like. What are the things that are leaving the playbook for 25? Are there things that you deliberately want to do a bit less in the year to come, Brad?
I think so. We're always requiring an ambitious team, and we're obviously looking at the tactics that work, and we want to amplify those. And then we also look at what doesn't work for us so well, and then we try to take some of that away, or we try a different approach. So I think it's all about looking at your data, figuring out what works, double down on that, or improve that. Looking at ways of tools to help you improve and get to the next level. And then so the ones that aren't performing so well, I suppose you got a choice. You figure out why they're not performing so well. Is there something that's wrong with how you've approached it? Is there a different angle that you haven't seen before? I think what's really important is before you lock it off completely, you validate that internally with it, whether it could be your customer success, your the people talking with your customers, your sales team, your CAM team. And I think what we've also learned is sometimes we've actually dropped tactics too early. And then a couple of years later, you figure out actually that probably was working, or we just didn't give it enough time. So I think it's also really important to look at that and figure out if your approach is wrong, or if there's another angle that you haven't seen. Because I suppose that's the approach that we're taking to it. Of course, there's stuff we've killed in these campaigns. We know that don't work, and we stop those. But I think it's always important to have a real data with people externally, someone other than the marketing team, and typically that's sales, and they can really point you in the right direction and give you an explanation of why that possibly didn't work, that message. And I think that's always something we try to do in marketing. Yeah.
That's really the fine line in marketing, that we need to continuously double down on what works, and we need to skip that stuff that doesn't work. But sometimes it's just our own fault that it didn't work. I played around with Reddit ads or September, October, but I did it with my left hand, didn't give it enough focus. It didn't work out. Will the ads on Reddit not work? I think it will. I just didn't do it well enough. Liam, what's leaving your playbook at Cognism in 25?
Yeah, so essentially, what we found is that because we're scaling so fast, the way that we built our campaigns oftentimes goes to where we are, but they're not necessarily going to take us to where we need to go. And part of that is ultimately down to the deeper insights that we have around our audience now and the more refined segmentation that we have. And so, if you just take an example of like a particular region that we're live in, like the US, right? The US is notoriously difficult to market to because it's expensive, right? But something that we found, and high levels of competition, and particularly when we're European, they're not always looking in this direction, right? But like one of the things that we found is actually like we do have a really compelling use case around our European data, and US companies, they are present in Europe, and so we're changing the way that we advertise to the US, and we're really going to focus in on the data that we have, who the decision makers are, making sure that we actually lean into the European data where it's appropriate, or we lean into our strength in mobile coverage, against our competitors where that's more appropriate for businesses that don't have European data. I guess so what we're leaving behind is ultimately, like, to this point, almost the entire way that we've set up the structure of our go-to-market strategy. And what we're doing going forward is we're completely redefining that to a more personalized and more bespoke approach that at every single layer tries to add value, at a regional level, talking about the problems or the challenges that the companies are experiencing in that market. At an industry level, we've got lots of industry campaigns now tailored to the industry. We weave that in with our ABM approach, so we have the signals-based activation as well, where we can speak directly to the type of decisions or triggers that the companies are performing. And I think that's it, right? The goal is to kind of be less broad and to be more personalized in a way that actually continually adds value and moves those brands through the journey or their buyer journey in the way that you want them to. So hopefully I've covered it. It's probably kept it quite broad still, but yeah, so we're leaving behind the broadness and moving towards more personalization.
Yeah, that's another live we need to do during this year, how to deliver the personalization at scale in B2B. Brian, what are you killing in your activities in 25 that you used to do?
I'd say we're very intentionally and slowly trying to move more of our budget from like our most expensive channels, which primarily paid search. I'll throw that out there. Very expensive. Primarily in the US, competition has exploded for us recently. There are probably 6 new competitors over the last 2 years that have really entered the space and started bidding in. The volume was down quite a bit, end of 23, even first half of 2024. So it got less effective, certainly. And I think the key for us as we look to move away from that, because we know other channels are more expensive, it takes more time and more like strategy to deploy other channels, right? You don't just pull money from pay search and throw it somewhere else and get results and move on, right? That would make marketing quite easy. But so when I think of it, I'm thinking of how do we test slowly? And I don't necessarily mean try new things slowly, but like the actual thoroughness of our tests. I think I've seen many times in my career, too many marketers, claim to be experts on CRO or A/B testing, and they're really just throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping something sticks. And then later they're like, see, now there's spaghetti on the wall, but it's like, but which part stuck? Like I'm not even certain. So I think you have to make your hypotheses ahead of time. You have to define your criteria and your metric. You have to execute the test, with thoroughness and expertise. And I think most importantly, which was touched on already, is you shouldn't be the one grading your own homework. I think it's really easy for marketers to try to grade their own homework. So I always encourage people to not be the one to grade their own homework. And yeah, that's the approach we're taking to move out of search. So I think, to move towards those channels I mentioned we're doubling down in. But yeah, it's not something that's going to happen overnight because it's so important to our pipeline today.
Yeah, I
but
can
where we
second
can
that.
pull the
One
less
thing is Google
effective
search is
dollars
increasingly
from
getting more
that. We're
expensive,
using
but
Dreamdata to try to
Google
analyze
is then
which
also becoming
campaigns we've
more and
already
more
shut down,
liberal about how they
certain
interpret
campaigns, certain
your
days,
exact
certain
match.
regions,
It's a
and
close match or it's a
being able to
very
effectively
smart.
deploy those
Yeah.
dollars somewhere
And
else.
you deliberately said it's this keyword, but then they give you something next to it. So it's really diluting in at least in exactness. Okay, time is flying. What's one fun little thing you want to test during the year? Doesn't have to be
Sprays.
all eggs in one basket, but just one thing that you would love to try out or you've seen somebody experiment with. Liam, anything come to mind?
Yeah, I'm going to say something controversial here. The way we look at marketing is in customer journeys, right? So we all try to map out where the user is and kind of where we needed to go and how we then distribute that across channels. And part of that kind of process, obviously, we enable the sales team with content, etc. But there's an opportunity there to automate some of that process, and this is going to be, with these, user gems. They're building a lot of good credibility at the moment around their AI SDR. I know this is going to upset some of the people that are in the office, but I, for our PLG brand, Casper, I'd be super interested to start experimenting with, an AI SDR. Some potentially, I personally don't see the SDR or AE role ever sort of going, and I'm not a salesperson, so I'm not going to advise on it, but I believe people buy from people. But I think that there is a middle point in the intersection between marketing and sales, which could potentially be the RevOps role where they own this strategic play, or whether it's marketing, still to be decided. But definitely, like, you can see that there's an opportunity there to automate some of that workflow and the handoff process, and actually take away a lot of that administrative task that possibly sales do, while maintaining that quality and messaging salience between the marketing touch points and the sales touch points before the handover. So that's an experiment that I'd really like to start running. And again, it leverages AI, and we're talking very much about that today, and it hopefully speeds up the processes while maintaining quality. But as with everything new, I'm sure there'll be some pitfalls and probably annoy some people with some really rubbish copy that gets sent out in emails. But that's something that I'd definitely like to test.
Super cool. Brad or Brian, who wants to go first? Brad, you get it.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose we're in a bit of we're in a conservative industry. And so I think a lot of the things we're already doing is quite experimental for receiving those messages and those content and those ads. So we have to be, we're getting called out sometimes when we do what we call account-based selling, which is one-to-one LinkedIn ads and campaigns. Because we're dealing with these massive manufacturing companies, we can basically target one of them because there's 10,000 people at the company. And because we hit multiple or several functions within that organization at different levels, we can do a campaign to one particular company. And even sometimes just calling out the company. Are you working at company X? And then starting we've been called out where they've written back to us and said, why are you writing to us, and why are you calling us out? So we're in a very conservative industry, and there's but I think what we can definitely see is it works. So I think we want to experiment a little bit more with that, and start really targeting those messages, and hitting a little bit more on their pains, because essentially that's what gets us noticed. And that's what we're in a market where we are competing against brands and software that are sort of really well known. We're trying to establish ourselves, so we're going to experiment with being a little bit more edgy in our marketing, a little bit more sort of maybe controversial in the things we say, So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes, and maybe not hugely groundbreaking for all of you, but for us, it is a little bit of an untapped market. So we're gonna try that and see how that goes.
Super cool. Brian, one little thing from you.
We're seeing our buyers get more and more skeptical and informed over time, but at the same time also being more influenced in ways that we typically would assign to like B2C buyers. So one thing I'm excited to explore is like some of those channels that have historically been viewed more as like B2C channels, where I've noticed I'm getting influenced on things, seeing a lot of great agencies doing good work on YouTube Shorts and other channels. So we'll certainly be exploring that. That'll be, to quote you, Steffen, hopefully not with my left hand. I'll be able to put enough focus into it, but it's one of those things where it's always like the side project, right?
Yeah, exactly. So almost out of time. I put one question in to the prep for you guys that I really would love to just hear from you, which is if you could give one piece of advice to the B2B marketers for 25, what would it be? And you only have 30 seconds each to answer it. Liam, you go first.
I'm going to quote Stephen Bartlett here. And it's ultimately around experimentation. And he says, failure is feedback. Feedback is knowledge, and knowledge is power. And like the way I explain to my team is like, you've got a problem and you're starting at the edge of the problem. And the more you experiment, the more you become specialized in understanding that problem, and you remove the unknowns. And I think for any marketer, you're going to start with lots of unknowns. And the more you can remove those, then the better you'll be at your job. And a lot of the time that just comes through experimentation. So I would encourage to experiment religiously.
Wonderful. Brad?
Yeah, I would say really guarding and combine those intent signals wherever you're getting them from, and really use those to move people from awareness into demand, and then trying to capture them. I think that's worked out really well for us. And I would say, do what you can to of the right people when they're ready to buy. That can make it huge 2% on each campaign. That's gonna add throughout the year. So yeah, that would be my advice for 2025.
Great, sweet. Brian?
I'll go first, full circle, and kind of take it back to AI. I think if you're hiring experienced marketers, they can really do a lot with AI. So my advice would be, as you're looking to grow your team or expand your team, hire the most experienced person you can afford. They'll gain the most efficiencies from the tools today. You want to capitalize on that experience. So I think that's like really, really timely thing to be thinking about.
Fantastic. That's it, guys. I want to thank you so much for the honesty and the transparent and the tangible advice that you gave. I really love when it's stuff that I can take home and just go execute myself. For the people who are listening, if you like this conversation, go search for Attributed, where you listen to podcasts, and you can subscribe to many more conversations like this. I think we have a back catalog of 200 conversations now. So you can dive in and really start digesting go-to-market conversations. But that's it, guys. Thank you so much for taking part, and the people online for asking questions. Have a great day ahead.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.